It's the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. It's February, as we know, and I've taken some time off. We'll catch up now a little bit, and we'll do some podcasts periodically before we get ripping again in early March, which we will, as we get ready for the conference tournaments, especially the Big East. Get ready for Selection Sunday, and of course, football free agency. The NFL season opens before you know it, March 12th. So before you know it, it'll be back to business in the NFL after this slow time. We are just about ready to open up the preseason schedule or the exhibition schedule for baseball, and so not that there's any real excitement there, but there's a couple of questions to answer. As far as the Mets, will they add another pitcher? Probably, but I don't think there's any feeling that they have to do it immediately. And I know there's a lot of thought about Quintana, but I don't think if the Mets wanted to go there, I think they already would have gone there. As for the Yankees, third base becomes the issue, but I'll tell you, do not count out the possibility of Chisholm going back to third base and them coming up with a second baseman. I think that's still a possibility. I think that's also in the back of the Yankees and Boone's mind, but I think we're going to start with him at second. The one thing you don't want to do this year is you don't want to bounce him back and forth. Let Chisholm come up with a position. Let him be able to concentrate on his entire game and not have to worry about it. So if he's better at second, leave him at second. If he's about the same at both, and I don't know where he's better, he's still kind of new at third base. But I don't think there's a real solution. If the Yankees are expecting some brilliant season out of LeMahieu, I don't think they're going to get it. They have enough guys to fill the bill over there at third base. But I still think, and I don't see a trade for Arenado. The bottom line is, it could be a surprise. It could be something different, and let's wait to see. But Chisholm's going to be at one spot, and they'll fill the other spot with whatever. I mean, that's what spring training is for. That's what the early season is for. It's not something that is going to keep anybody awake late nights. That's for sure, because they're going to be adequately able to handle the position with what they have on hand. Whether it's Cabrera, who's the most logical guy in my mind, or not, or they wind up getting somebody else and then flopping Chisholm into the other spot. The Yankees, listen, they're not going to be the same team offensively. Judge is going to get a tremendous amount of walks this year unless something unusual happens, because Stanton's going to be in and out of the lineup. Look, he's probably going to start the season on the shelf. There's nobody there to protect him. You don't have a Soto Judge situation. So, now, if you think Judge got passed a lot last year, he's going to get passed a ton because Soto's not going to be on first base or have first and second when Judge comes up anymore. So when he comes up with nobody on, especially in a situation late in the game, he's going to get walked a lot. And there's nobody there that can adequately protect him in that lineup. There's only a couple of guys capable of that. But with what they added overall and what they added in terms of pitching, they can be every bit as good. And you got the idea that, and we'll talk a lot more about this because we have plenty of time to talk about baseball, but you got the idea that the way the World Series ended and the embarrassment of that fifth inning has stuck in the Yankees' craw to such an extent, it seems to bother them even more than not making the playoffs the year before. So from that standpoint, I think they are rededicated. The question is, are they good enough? They're good enough to win the American League, but you have a very, very strong chance that the Dodgers could be waiting, or somebody better than them could be waiting. It could be the Mets. It could be the Braves. It could be the Dodgers. Now, the Dodgers, who are going to look at an over-under number, I think the highest that I've ever seen, 104.5. I don't think I've seen one. I've seen it over 100. I've never seen it that high. I mean, when you have to win 105 games to win your total, that's insanity. absolute insanity, but that's how good they are and how loaded they are. And that takes you to the other question in baseball, the bigger question. And you're already hearing it already. And Manfred got hit with it in his state of the game. The inequality in baseball, the payroll disparity, the inequity in revenues has become so dramatic, has become so painful for baseball. You have the haves, the super haves, and the have-nots, which is most of the sport. And the word is starting to emanate, and it's going to become a roar how much the bottom 20 teams in Major League Baseball want to change the way the sport is run, which means they want some kind of viability economically. And right now, they don't have a way of getting it, because what baseball has that other sports don't have is an enormous amount of unequal regional rights. Some teams are trying to scrap up any money regionally for TV, while the Dodgers are getting paid $334 million a year on their regional TV package. That's the problem. That gives them a chance. The Dodgers spent all this money and made money. They're not going into hock doing this. A big part of it was Ohtani having the entire contract, or virtually the entire contract, deferred, which gave them such an ability to just, spend money. But they have just spent like crazy. The only one that's even been in their stratosphere is the Mets, who are going to enter the season with a $325 million payroll. Dodgers are going to be upwards of that. And when you realize that in free agency this year, 40% of the money was spent by the Mets and the Dodgers. But what we're starting to hear already, and what you can look forward to, is Armageddon in 2026. Because when that collective bargaining agreement expires, do not think for 1 second that the owners, and this is going to be the commissioner's biggest problem, to unify that owners with a message and a negotiating platform that the players can live with, because you're going to have so many militant owners, much more than 50%, who are going to want to really go to scorched earth because they can't compete now. And they know in the future it's going to get worse. Baseball's going to make statements like, we have to make sure we grow on national product. Hey, baseball's not built to grow a national product. It's a game that is still regionally built. It is not a game like the NFL, which is a complete national product, which shares equal money among all teams and has a very generous salary cap that everyone can live with. But the players in baseball, brought up a different way, with incredible power in that union, will never, and I mean never, they will go a long time. They will go much more than a full season before they would ever, and I think they might go even to the past 2 seasons before they would ever accept a salary cap. And if you don't have a salary cap in baseball, you are never going to get any kind of equality now, because the haves and have-nots have drifted, just like they have in America, have completely separated. You have a couple of teams at the top spending money, making money. You know who they are. I don't have to tell you, just look at the payrolls. And those teams are making money. The Yankees are making money. The Yankees they have a budget now. They live under a different regime with Hal than they did with George. George would spend and spend and spend because winning was his biggest motivation. Hal can talk that it is, and he does spend money, but to a point. To a point. Cohen will spend till he wins. I know he wants to do it the right way. I know he wants to build through the draft and he wants to build through his farm system. And that's the smarter way to go about it long term because he's looking for a long-term winner. But he's going to keep spending until he gets his championship. And the only thing that's going to slow him down is if the ballpark's not full, because you can tell the one thing that's stuck in his craw, and he and his wife have a very good relationship with the fans. They've done a very good job of cultivating that. But it sticks in Cohen's craw that the Mets were 18th in attendance. And he figures with the product he's giving them now, they shouldn't be 18th in attendance in New York, and they shouldn't. And that should change dramatically. And I think it will with Soto this year. And you're going to have two very good teams in New York. And it's going to be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of comparisons between Judge and Soto. And Judge is the better player. But Soto's a superb offensive player who doesn't have a lot of peaks and valleys. He's ultra consistent offensively. That's what makes him different, is that he just doesn't have a lot of bad days at the plate because he's so disciplined and so good at what he does. But as a far all-around player, it's not even close between the two of them. One's on a different level. But one is just a superb offensive player, and now you have two giant players in baseball in New York and two very good teams. And it'll be interesting to see, but they're both behind the Dodgers in any realistic order. The Dodgers right now are the dominant force in the sport. And that does not look like it's going to change anytime soon. So enjoy this year because things could get very rocky at the end of 26. And I think they will. Like I said, we'll do a lot more baseball in the days and weeks to come. And you know what? We got a long time. Still got 7 weeks to opening day. So we got 6 weeks to opening day. So we got a long time to deal with this. Now, I haven't done a podcast since the Jets announced that they were parting ways with Rodgers. And I almost got the idea that, yes, they parted ways with him, but they wanted to embarrass him too, if they could. The problem is, how much can you embarrass a guy who is going to Canton on roller skates? I mean, the average quarterback rating that gets in the Hall of Fame is a shade under 105. Not quarterback rating as we know it, but a Hall of Fame rating, when you rate the players in a system that deals with them in ranking. And the 105 mark usually gets you the number for a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback. His number is like 190. He's the only quarterback in the history of the league to have 400 touchdown passes and 100 quarterback rating. He's a 4-time MVP, a Super Bowl champion with a glowing winning record. Hey, it didn't work out. He got hurt the first year, and he was under the worst coaching I have ever seen. But I wish, and I understand what Glenn's doing. And Glenn's the boss, and I understand what he's doing. I want there to be, I know what he's saying, and I know what he thinks, and he comes from the Parcells School, which I obviously know so well. One voice. There's one voice. We talk in one voice, we act in one voice, but there's one voice that leads. I'm not having a diva quarterback. Okay? I'm not having an old diva quarterback. I know what he was thinking. And in the long run, he might be right, but in the short run, he cut off his nose to spite his face. Because when you learn that Rodgers wants to play, and now it's clear he wants to play, and I think he will play. And I'll tell you in a minute where I think the best spot for him is. I mean, the best spot's San Francisco, but they're going to go with Purdy, so you know that. So he's not going to San Francisco. But he wanted to play. Now, would he have agreed to all the things they supposedly hammered at him and make sure that got leaked to hammer at him, to try and get their pound of flesh and embarrass him? Except when you're the Jets and you have been bums and been as bad as any organization can be for so long, you can't embarrass a quarterback of his ilk. There's no way. He's in a different place. He's untouchable in the world of football compared to you. You can't, because he had 1 year on a bad team and he has been injured now and hasn't had a great year in a couple of years. The bottom line is he's still an all-time great. You can't damage his career. You can't touch his career if you're the Jets. So it didn't work. I understand what Aaron wanted and what he wants. He wants one voice. He wants one message. He wants a unified team. He wants there to be teamwork and a new culture. And I understand that. And he didn't want a diva quarterback to disrupt that. And Rodgers is the ultimate diva quarterback. Do I know if Rodgers would have cut out McAfee for the year? I don't know. I don't know if he could have digested some of the rules they wanted to give him. But they clearly didn't want him, so they were shoving those rules down his throat anyway, because they didn't want him. But not wanting him was cutting your nose off to spite your face. Glenn, with some reasonable, not even smart, reasonable free agent maneuvering and a decent draft. And I would have liked them to draft the Penn State tight end, Warren, if he's available when they pick. Because I think he'd be a terrific weapon in their system. Not in their system, but with their players. They don't really have a system yet. If they had brought Rodgers back, who they can't duplicate that kind of quarterback play. Oh, he wasn't great last year. He wasn't great last year. He played hurt sometimes, but he played behind the worst coaching of all time. He played behind an offensive line that was terribly coached and terribly drilled. They were the worst short yardage running team of all time. They couldn't run the ball with any power. They couldn't run the ball in the red zone, which you must do if you're going to score touchdowns. He still had 28 touchdowns, 28 TD passes. He could have had 35 with the drops. He had more drops than anybody in the league. And the team was horribly coached with solid coaching, not even good coaching, solid coaching, with an offensive line coach who knows what he's doing, with an offensive coordinator who knows what he's doing. And with the weapons they had and what they could have put around them in the year to come, they could have been exactly what the Chargers were last year. They could have gone from 5 to 11 or 12 wins. They lost 7 games that they gave away. They lost games that they led in the fourth quarter, 2 by the kicker, 2 by defensive mistakes, 1 because they didn't manage the clock against Miami. Okay? The bottom line is they had leads in all these games. With all the problems they had, firing the coach, hiring an interim coach who now had to do 2 jobs and couldn't do either one of them. So the defense failed because he wasn't there in that room. Yeah, they didn't have Salah to help the defense, and now you had no head coach. The thing was an utter disaster. Yeah, an offensive coach, line coach no one liked, okay, and wasn't very good. The bottom line is it was as bad a coaching situation as I've ever seen in the NFL. And still, you saw what was capable with that, what was possible with that quarterback, what he was capable of. You can't replace that. You can't go find someone who has what Aaron Rodgers has. And he still wanted to play. It was a dumb decision. They won't be any good next year. And now, Adam's going to leave, other guys are going to leave, and they're going to have to rebuild the team. And we're going to go through a whole rebuilding thing, and you're going to see whether Glenn can coach or not, because we don't know if he can be a head coach or not yet. And I'm not overly impressed with the staff. There would have been a real possibility for an enormous turnaround if Rodgers had stayed and they ran him out. Like I said, I understand the thought process, but he cut off his nose to spite his face. Now, where does Rodgers go? A lot of speculation. Sounds like he wants to play. Sounds like the people who, do this reporting every day of their lives You know who the guys are. They all say he wants to play. I'm sure they've talked to him or talked to people who know him. There's not a lot of spots because if I'm Rodgers, before I'm going to the Raiders or going to Tennessee, I'm retiring. Why go to another bad situation where you're going to get the heck beat out of you? You don't have the weapons to win. And if you were 500, you've done a lot. What's the point of that? Go to a place where you can win. Now, you want to run the Niners are going to re-sign Purdy. You want to go to run the luck of the draw and take the idea of I become vice president because you never know when you're going to become president and take the backup job in San Francisco and wait for Purdy either to fall on his face, which probably won't happen, or get hurt, which could happen. Don't see him doing that. It would be a way to have a fun finish, but don't see him doing that. The only team that would be interested in him that I can see a playoff run is the Colts. The Colts quarterback situation is lousy. Richardson has not learned how to play. I am not saying yet that Richardson is not going to be an NFL quarterback. What I'm going to say to you, though, is he needs a couple of more years in Joplin. He's not ready. He has to learn the passing game. We know he can run. He gets hurt a lot. He misses games. He takes a lot of bad hits. He gets stung a lot. Because he leaves himself wide open. He doesn't understand anything about the passing game. He's not in any way a polished passer. And he would be absolutely, his career would be enhanced if he spent a year or two behind Rodgers. There, Rodgers goes into a team which has a good head coach. They know what they're doing offensively. He gets to play in a dome in his home games. Enormous factor. No bad weather, no wind, nothing. Enormous factor. He's got a big-time running back, one of the best in the world. He's got a very solid offensive line, which needs a little refurbishing at the edges, but it can be very good. And if you're going to get Rodgers, then you should go put some money into that offensive line. They have underrated receivers, and they have a team that could listen. They lost 3 games this year that there's no chance they lose, including one where Taylor in Denver cost them a playoff spot by throwing the ball down before he hit the goal line on a 50-yard run, which is one of the most unconscionable plays in the history of the NFL. It cost them that ball game. And it cost them a playoff spot. That team with Rodgers can win 11 games next year without any question. I think that's the spot. And I think if he goes there, he's going to make the Jets look bad. Now, whether they can agree, whether they agree on how they want to do, whether Rodgers has demands or not, I don't know. Whether he gets along when he negotiates, you never know with Rodgers. We know he's quirky. And listen, he's an all-time great who's at the end of his career. We know that. He doesn't need money. He can't really enhance his career anymore. There's nothing. I mean, he's won Super Bowls. He's been All-Pro 6 or 7 times, maybe 8 times. He's a 4-time MVP. I mean, there's not anything else he can do. He's going to the Hall of Fame 5 years after he retires to the day. I mean, so we know all that. So if you're going to come back, you go to a place where you can win and not get the heck beat out of you. The Colts is the place. The Jets was the place. I understand Aaron's thought process. He doesn't want a bigger-than-life, pain-in-the-neck diva quarterback when he takes over and tries to change the culture of the Jets. Aaron wound up making it more dysfunctional because first of all, Saleh was a terrible head coach who was a bad leader. And he let Rodgers walk all over him, and that actually hurt Rodgers. See, that's the thing that the player never gets. is that when you get a coach who does that, you actually hurt your own career. Because you're better suited in a system where the coach is in charge, not when you're in charge. You just got to get with the right coach. But that team had a chance for a tremendous turnaround. They have talent. They have a core. They just have to be coached, and they need a new culture. And maybe Glenn was the guy for that, but he missed a big opportunity for a classic turnaround to be the toast of New York in 1 year. I don't think there's any way Rodgers goes to the Giants, and he shouldn't. The Giants aren't ready to win, and that would be playing in that stadium, in that division, and dealing with that with a bad Giant team. I would not do it under any circumstances. I would not do it. Now, a couple of things. We are weeks away still, almost, here we are on the 19th. We're a little less than a month away from the Big East tournament. Always interesting, and then right into the NCAA tournament. Right now, the way I see it, the two best teams in the country are Auburn and Duke. If I put four teams on the one line right now, I know they did this, the NCAA did it last week. Auburn, Duke, Bama, and Florida. SEC is loaded, as we know. They'd be on the one line. Houston, Tennessee, Iowa State, which is a really good team. They had a slump because one of their real key guys was out. They lost 3 games in a row, but they're back now. And A&M would be on the second line. And A&M's a very dangerous team. Texas Tech, Wisconsin, which is coming on. Michigan State, dangerous as always. And St. John's, to me, is on the 3 line. I'll get to them in a minute. And then UConn, which has been shaky, won a big game coming from behind against Nova last night when they were down 14 in the second half, 6 minutes to play and won it. Killer game, because if Villanova had won, if Villanova had beaten UConn twice, they were building a resume where they could have snuck in. That was a tough loss for them last night. Kentucky, which has been disappointing. Marquette, Missouri would be on the 4 line. Listen, I've watched St. John's play almost every game this year. I've seen them in person 3 times. I've been at their practice. I was at a practice about a month ago. I did a thing they're doing this thing on Patino and St. John's on Vice, this 6-parter or 8-parter, and they asked me to go down and sit down for a couple of interviews, and I did, and then I watched practice, and I talked to Rick. And, hey, it's no secret. They're great defensively. They have unique qualities defensively because they can switch everything. I mean, they remind me of the old Louisville teams. They can switch everything. They can't shoot. If they had one guy on this team who could the best way I would put it is a comfortable scorer. Like Creighton has 3 that are just comfortable scorers. They can score just without any real effort. St. John's has nobody that can score without a real effort. They miss more layups. They miss more dunks. They miss more free throws. They miss more threes than you could ever imagine. If they had one of those guys, they could be a top 5 team. They are the single best defensive team in the country. I know the metrics say Tennessee's better. Nonsense. Tennessee's more physical. St. John's is better because St. John's will turn you over. They are relentless, and they wear down every opponent. They own the last 6 minutes of every game. Except they can't shoot free throws. So when they're in front in those games, and I'm going to tell you right now, the 3-point shooting is going to haunt them. The free throw shooting is going to get them knocked out of the tournament before they should get knocked out. Because they have 3 guys who go to the line. Lewis, who will make his free throws usually. 70%er, solid, made 6 in a row against Creighton. Zuby, who went 2 for 10 on the foul line against Creighton and can't make his free throws. And Richmond, who has really come on gangbusters the last month, has made big shots, has been great down the stretch of games, but he can't make his free throws. You can't have a guy who can get to the basket as well as anybody in all of college basketball in Richmond, and he can't make his free throws. This has got to, and I'm telling you right now, I don't think it's going to improve. Maybe Rick should talk to Jay Wright and ask him how his team's always shot better free throw shooting than any team in the country, because maybe it would wear off, or maybe it would rub off a little bit, because if they don't get Zuby and Richmond to make more free throws, they're going to get knocked out in the second round or something when they shouldn't. They have the ability to get to the regional final. From there, it's, hey, you're going to play a great team in the regional final and you hope you get to a Final Four. They're not, in my mind, they're not as good as Auburn. They're not as good as Duke. They're not as good as Alabama. And they might not be as good as Florida. They can play with any other team in the country straight up. I think Auburn and Duke are better than everybody else. And Cooper Flagg is sensational. I mean, we all know that. If you haven't heard the name, you will. And I'm sure you have by now. He'll be the first pick in the draft. He's going to be a great pro. He's going to be a really giant star. I mean, he's already making more money than anybody in college basketball. You know, Duke paid him almost $3.8 million. He's going to be there 1 year. He got paid $3.8 million to go there, but everyone knew he was going to be this good. And he'll be gone. Despite him saying he loves Duke and he's thinking about the college experience, hey, nobody who's going to be the first pick in the draft is going to not go. And he's going to be the first pick in the draft, hands down. So he's not going back. He's going to have one chance to win a championship, and he might do it. They're definitely capable of doing it. Auburn, Alabama, which is a tremendous offensive team. Florida, people haven't talked about Florida all year, highly talented team. And the other teams that are dangerous, Tennessee's dangerous. They're hot and cold, but they're dangerous. Houston is dangerous. Not as good as last year, but dangerous. Iowa State, very dangerous. And St. John's is dangerous, but I cannot call them a top 5 team until I would see them shoot better. I think Scott can become more of a force from 3. I don't think anybody else will. I think he can. I thought for a while Smith would, but I'm disappointed in Smith. I think in Rick's mind, Smith's been a disappointment. But I think he's useful, and he's a very good playmaker. But he hasn't been the offensive player, other than his playmaking, which is good. He has not been the offensive scorer that we thought he would be. And I don't know how big a problem he's been behind the scenes. Maybe he's been a real pain in the neck. I don't know that. But you get the feeling he might be. He just doesn't seem like he fit in the way they thought he was going to fit in. And that Richmond and Smith were going to be this all-world backcourt. Richmond has come on gangbusters. He really has, except he's got to make his foul shots. Same thing with Zuby. Zuby can get to the line. He's going to get offensive rebounds. He's going to get putbacks. He misses too many putbacks, but the bottom line is he's going to get to the line. He doesn't make his free throws. This is going to be a killer. If they could just be a little more consistent shooting the basketball, they could have a really big run this year. As it is right now, they're going to win the regular season Big East, and they're going to win the Big East tournament in my mind. Why? Because they're playing in Madison Square Garden. But the other thing is they are going to be better suited to playing that many days in a row than any other team, and they're going to wear down everybody in the tournament. Plus, the league is not strong. They're better than UConn. They're better than Marquette. And those are the only 2 teams, and they're better than Creighton. And Creighton might be the most dangerous team for them because of what Kalkbrenner and Ashworth can do scoring. Ashworth's a pain in the neck. And he's an automatic scorer. St. John's is good. I think the worst that could happen to St. John's is they be a 4 seed. I think if they're a 3 and a 4, you have a very good chance that they will be in the East with Duke as the 3 or the 4. And I think it'll be as the 3. And you have a good chance that if they can win their third game, how about a Duke St. John's regional final in Newark? How hot would that ticket be? How great would that be? I'd want to see that in person. That's a heck of that would be a lot of fun. It really would. But you like everything that's gone on. It's been a real revival for the St. John's. It's been a real resurrection or redemption for Rick. It's been, and he's coached brilliantly. The Garden sounds like the Garden should now. They're getting the crowds that they had hoped to get. They're building that momentum into March, and they're getting ready to put on a show in the Big East. But they have got to be more consistent shooting the basketball, or they're going to get their hearts broken. And by their hearts broken, I mean, listen, they're going to win the first game. They're going to overwhelm somebody. They could get beat the second round because they miss shots and miss free throws. You know how it is in the NCAA tournament. You got to make shots down the stretch. They're going to set you up in a game that, unless you blow them out, if you can blow everybody out, fine. But and they have a habit of getting behind in the first half and having to come from behind, then taking a lead, then taking a sizable lead. But that's the question: what happens there? And you know that the other team is going to be ready to set you up to shoot 1-on-1 in big spots down the stretch. And I can see them clanging, 3 straight 1-on-1s. And that could cost you a lot of games. The way this thing works, you got to make your free throws. If you don't, you got to have some semblance of making threes. Hey, Rick's handled the threes right. He encourages them to shoot them. He doesn't get on them for missing. If you notice Patino, he gets on them when they're out of position, when they don't play defense properly, when they don't switch properly, or they don't, make a play defensively. He never has to yell at this team for not hustling, because I never see this team not hustle. Never. This team plays pedal to the metal all the time, and give Patino credit for that. They play hard all the time. They're just not good offensively. They're bricklayers. The other thing you're moving towards is obviously free agency. And like I said, these next couple of weeks, we'll keep in touch with one podcast because it's slow. I mean, it's slow. There's not much going on. I don't want to create stuff for no reason. And then obviously we'll be back doing a ton of them, as we always do, throughout March and through the tournament every day and everything else. As far as the top free agents, you know what you're always looking at. You don't expect any quarterbacks in there this year. There's going to be, I'm not counting Rodgers. It's a special situation. You got a quarterback in there in Sam Darnold who's going to be, somebody's going to give him a big contract. T. Higgins is on there, but I expect Cincinnati to make a deal to bring him back. Then you look at it, premium offensive linemen, if they're on there, you expect them to go back to their teams. Same thing with really decent pass rushers. And there's no real quality defensive lineman on there, because that's very rare if you ever see one on there. But those linemen, both sides of the ball, are going off fast. So that if Trey Smith's going to be in free agency, he's going to go fast, the guard from the Chiefs. That Stanley's going to go quick, the tackle from the Ravens. I expect those guys to go back to their teams. Chris Godwin, who is a really good wide receiver, I think he's better suited to stay in Tampa. I think he will. So I think a lot of these guys might stay with their own teams. Diggs is going to be on the move. There's no question about that. See, I don't think Diggs is a right fit for the Giants. I've heard his name. I do not like him for the Giants at all. at all. Get another a young receiver to go with Neighbors. Don't go that route. You got Reed, you got Sweat, you got guys like that. You got Holland, good defensive players. Holland from Miami, Reed, of course, who's a solid corner with the Jets. You'd like to see him go back there. I don't think he will. Sweat's the same thing. Reddick, I don't think anybody's going to want right now. I think Reddick's in a show you mood now. He's going to have to show you because he did nothing. So to me, I understand that was not handled well, both sides, but he didn't do anything last year to distinguish that he's going to, no one's going to give him a big deal right now under any circumstances. But when you see key offensive linemen on there, you expect them all to go back to their own teams. Rarely will they not. And let's be honest, the Chiefs know that they have got to solve their tackle situations so they can put Thuney back where he belongs at guard and rededicate themselves to that offensive line. Listen, they did it when they got beat by Tampa. They rebuilt the offensive line. They got beat on they didn't get beat on the offensive line this time. They got destroyed. They will rebuild the offensive line. They'll put everybody back in the right spots. They'll get the guys they need. They got to get 2 tackles. They'll get them, and then we'll see what happens. But with Worthy and Rice, they got now 2 very, very explosive, highly explosive young receivers. And what's Kelsey going to do? I don't know. I don't think it matters, to be honest with you. I think they'll be fine without him. I think if he comes back for another year, so be it. He clearly has lost a step in a big way. But hey, guys on Kansas City have to get old. It's hard to keep going back to those Super Bowls. It's rare to keep going back to those Super Bowls. And Kansas City's done that. With amazing consistency. They took it on the chin this time. I thought Philly would beat them. I did not think they would destroy them. And they destroyed them. The final score is nonsense. They destroyed them. But I thought Andy handled it really well. I thought Mahomes handled it well. And Andy said the right things. He said, hey, my bad. I thought I could get by with this offensive line. I couldn't. They took it to us. We'll get better, and we'll be back. And I believe that. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to win next year because you know what? Maybe it'll be Buffalo's year. Maybe it'll be the Ravens' year. Who knows? Maybe it'll be one of those guys' chances to get there finally. You can't expect Mahomes to get there every year. I thought the Ravens were the best team this year. I would have liked to see the Ravens play the Eagles the Eagles would not have done that in any way to the Ravens. Now, this might be disrespectful, and Eagle fans wouldn't want to hear this, but I think if it had been Ravens and the Eagles, I think the Ravens would have beaten them. But if they take umbrage with that, I can understand that, especially off a dominant Super Bowl. And Baltimore didn't do its job. And obviously now, with what has continued to be unearthed, it looks like they're going to need a new kicker. Because that thing has come caving, it just, cascading down on his head. And every day you see it, it gets worse. So it sounds like they will have to get a new kicker. But they gave a game to Buffalo. No knock on the Bills. Ravens, I thought, set up the way they were, with the personnel they had and the way they were playing. I thought they were the team that was going to go all the way. They didn't. They made mistakes. They turned the ball over. They dropped the ball in big spots. Andrews had a nightmare for a whole quarter. I mean, a very good player had as bad a quarter as you could ever have in a big spot. But it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting. Give the Eagles credit for what they did. They went there, and on the grandest stage, they played a great game. So to them go the spoils. Now, it's a long way back. There's no question about that. And it all starts before you turn around. March 12th, the NFL season gets underway again. And it's amazing to me as I watch the NBA just embarrass itself on All-Star Weekend. And all the problems. And hockey's done a very good job here these last 2 weeks, but you realize in the grand scheme of things, in this world that we live in right now in 2025, how utterly dominant the NFL has become in terms of just what their game means to media, to television, to this country. I mean, it's just, they are in a position of such utter dominance. They can do no wrong. They really, I mean, sometimes they try to do as much wrong as they can, and they still can't even hurt themselves. That's how powerful the game is right now. That's how ultra successful and popular the game is right now. It's in an incredible place. It really is. And its hold on the marketplace just gets stronger and stronger while these other teams have problems. And listen, give Adam Silver credit for one thing. He's got a rough situation right now. And that All-Star Weekend was a disaster. And their season's a disaster. But he did manage to get a ton of money with sinking ratings, which is an amazing achievement. I mean, really, he pulled the heist. He really did. The owners should be very, very proud of him because he came up with an incredible amount of money considering how bad the TV ratings have been. And we're going into a different world, there's no question, and a different technology and everything else, but that sport's hurting. Nobody wants to see 83s. And what Draymond Green said about the game, and I know he's not the most popular figure, but you know what? In this case, he was right. He isn't often right, but in this case, he was. We'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.